Have you ever found yourself always saying yes when people ask you to do things? What about feeling guilty for saying no to those same people and then feeling absolutely exhausted afterwards? In this episode, we will talk about ways that you can develop and maintain healthy boundaries and still remain compassionate and caring for other people. Welcome to Tips with Dr. Hips. This show was created to share real insights about mental health and help you with personal growth. We all have things that we struggle with, and we absolutely deserve to have tips and tricks to help us feel better. I'm your host, Dr. Hips, and today we are going to talk about two people. I want you to meet John and Carmen because both of these people have some of the same problems, and those problems are unhealthy personal boundaries and poor self-care, which leads them to feeling extremely exhausted and anxious. First, I want you to meet John. John is married with 2 kids. John is a family guy and an office manager. But there's something unique that I want you to know about John. John is the only one in his household who is working and bringing in money. But John struggles with saying no. He struggles with saying no to his kids, to his wife, as well as other immediate family members. If you ask John to do anything, John will jump at the opportunity to do those things for you, even if that thing is absolutely unreasonable. So let's take a look at some of the things that John will do and the lengths that John will go for his family. So John's in-laws are flying into town, and they decide to fly into an airport that's about 2 hours away from John's house. But John's brother lives 5 minutes from the airport. However, John's in-laws calls John and says, "Hey John, can you come and pick us up from the airport? We will come in around 5. John says, absolutely, not thinking about the fact that he has to pick up his children from school and the fact that he still has a lot of work to do in the office. John absolutely hops into the car and drives the long distance to pick up those in-laws, even though he knows that it's gonna put a strain on himself. All right, let's take a look at another decision that John made. Remember, John is the only one who is bringing income into the home. So John's wife and children want to go to Disney World. And remember, John struggles with saying no. So John knows his financial situation, but because he struggles with saying no, John says yes and absolutely books a trip to Disney World, even though the trip to Disney World is gonna put them in a financial hardship. John feels really anxious regarding his family's expectations of him because he is always a yes person. He will absolutely say yes to everything that they ask him to do. So he really struggles with those expectations because they never expect him to say no. All right, so that was John. Now I want to introduce you to Carmen, and then we'll come back to visit John a little bit later. Carmen is a college student. She absolutely loves spending time with her friends and her family. Carmen is involved in all sorts of campus activities and clubs. Carmen's issue is that her friends and those clubs that she's involved with often volunteer her for a lot of things without asking her permission. But Carmen, because she is Carmen and Carmen likes to please others, Carmen feels obligated to do those things that she was volunteered for, even though she didn't know about them beforehand. So Carmen is usually a straight A student, but her grades have started to fall because she has been overextending herself to the clubs and to her friends because they've been really ramping up the amount of things that they volunteer her for. And it's really starting to take a toll on Carmen. Carmen is starting to feel burnt out and absolutely exhausted, but she is afraid to lose her friends or her membership within the various clubs that she's participating in on campus. Carmen is really struggling and doesn't know what to do. So, as you can see from those scenarios, both of these people are really struggling. So, let's take a look at some tips that we can implement to help them relieve some of the stress that they are experiencing. So our first tip is for them to recognize the problem. So let's take a look back at John. So John, his issue is that he never says no, regardless of what he already has going on. If somebody asks him to do something, he's gonna jump on it. John is extra generous when it comes to his wife and his children and anybody in his family. John has poor boundaries and really struggles to manage those things. Now, let's take a look at Carmen. Carmen absolutely loves her friends, but it is causing her to have a dip in her grades. So Carmen really struggles with telling people no as well. And Carmen also struggles with wanting to please others. Now, if you notice, that's also something that John struggles with as well. Because let's look back at the time where John's in-laws gave him a call and asked him to drive 2 hours to the airport. John could have very well said, no, my brother Alex is closer. He lives 5 minutes away. He could come pick you up. But instead, John said yes, hopped in the car, and went on to go pick up his in-laws because he didn't want to disappoint them. So John struggles with those expectations that his family has. So, something that you can do to help you recognize whether or not you have these same struggles is to ask yourself, do you struggle with saying no when you have already worked yourself to the max? Are you available 24/7 to your friends, to work, or to family? Do you not have a cutoff? Do you find yourself saying, oh, I'll just check this work email and then I'll respond really quickly because it's only gonna take about 2 seconds. And then that 2 seconds turns into 3 hours. And now you've spent 3 hours doing something for someone else, whether it be your family or friend or your work, wherein you could have been doing something for you to help you get a reset. And lastly, you can ask yourself, do you have unrealistic expectations for yourself when it comes to helping others? Do you feel that you are the only person in the world that can help that individual with whatever it is that they're struggling with? Do you feel like if you say no, then they won't receive help? Do you feel like if you don't do it, then nobody will do it? Those are some things that will let you know that your expectations might be a little bit unrealistic, because it's not true that if you don't do it, then it won't get done. It just won't get done by you at that time, right? All right, now, tip number 2. Once you've identified that you have an issue and that these are some of the things that you struggle with, you can then identify your needs. So focus on what you need. So let's revisit our friends John and Carmen. So we'll start with Carmen. So Carmen could really benefit from some healthy boundaries because she's really overextending herself and overexerting her time, because she's really putting a lot of time into her clubs and hanging out and doing things with her friends, but she's not really giving the time and attention that she needs to her studies. Because remember, she used to be a straight A student. Her grades are falling, meaning that she is not taking the amount of time that she should be to actually study for her classes. So that's something that Carmen needs. Now, let's take a look at John. What does John need? So John needs boundaries as well, because he is also overextending himself both financially as well as socially when it comes to his family. He really needs to establish a budget and recognize when he cannot do certain things. He knows that he's the only one that is bringing money into the household. And so he needs to sit down and have a conversation with his wife and his children as it relates to his finances, to ensure that they are not overextending, so that it is not causing him to be anxious and feeling really burnt out, so that his performance at work doesn't dip, right? Because once he starts to feel financially strained and he starts to feel anxious all the time, his work performance starts to dip, and that's not good, because he's the only one that is making money. So when it comes to focusing on what you need, oftentimes society, and let's be honest, sometimes our family and our friends might look down on us when we try to focus and do something that's beneficial for ourselves. And it's important to know that needs look different for everyone. So for example, for me, I need at least an hour nap to reset after a long day of work, right? And if I don't get that 1 hour nap, then I am not a fun person to be around. So that's me recognizing what I need. So you could pause this video here and really think about what you need. All right, if you're unpaused it, we're keeping rolling. The third tip for today is to establish your boundary. So first, you need to identify what that boundary should be. And then you need to communicate that boundary to others, meaning you have to speak up. Tell them exactly what you need and don't be afraid to say no. So something that Carmen should do in her situation with her boundary is to let her friends know that she doesn't appreciate them volunteering her for things without first asking if she would like to participate in that. She also needs to let her friends know that she needs time to study because she's falling behind in her grades. So she needs to let them know that she needs that time, and then she needs to stand firm in establishing what that time is and not allowing them to impede upon that time. John just needs to have a good old conversation and sit down with his wife to really establish what the boundaries look like surrounding the money. Not saying that John can't absolutely do vacations with the family, but they need to be reasonable. They need to be within his price range, and they need to be a collectively agreed upon activity that he and his wife agree on, that the kids will also enjoy. And then John also needs to have a conversation with other family members, letting them know that he needs to first take care of his main responsibilities. So if you remember, on the day that John had to drive that 2 hours to get to the airport, he needed to pick up the kids from school. So he wasn't able to pick up those kids because he needed to drive 2 hours to go pick up his in-laws from the airport. John needs to establish the fact that he needs to take care of his main responsibilities first, and he can't just drop everything when somebody asks him to do something. These are things that John needs to discuss with all of his family members. And also he could just remind his in-laws, hey, my brother lives 5 minutes away. He could come pick you up. So again, just a quick recap of the tips. First, you need to recognize what the problem is. Next, you need to identify your needs, focusing on specifically you and what you need. And then you need to roll into establishing your boundary. Having that conversation with yourself, sitting down and maybe writing out what is my boundary, what do I need my boundary to be, and then communicating with those individuals who you want to know what your boundaries are, and also remembering that it's okay for you to say no. And saying no does not mean that you don't care or that you don't want to help someone. It simply means, no, I can't do this thing right now because I have X, Y, Z to do, or simply you just saying no because you're tired, right? You don't really owe an explanation, but you can say no and then establish a different day to do it, or just simply say no just because you don't feel like doing it at the time. If you found this video helpful, please like it, leave me a comment, and share with somebody who you think could benefit from setting some boundaries. And don't forget to hit the notification bell so you are notified when the next episode comes out. Until next time.